afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Mauricio Vasquez, Director of Programs of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County. We're happy to host these conversations with candidates to county council and various elected positions this year. And today we have Maricé Morales with us, who's a candidate for County Council District 6. And she happens to be one of 3 Hispanic candidates for the same district. And we're honored to have you with us today. Maricé was elected to the Maryland House of Delegates in 2014 as the first Latina to represent District 19 in Montgomery County. She was the youngest Latina in the United States to serve at the state level. She served as founding member and vice chair of the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus. She also authored legislation that we applied in our courts today. During her time in Annapolis, Maricé sponsored legislation to reform the criminal justice system, protect women in the workplace, immigrant communities, protect workers' rights, and combat the rape culture in our country. She sat on the Judiciary Committee for her first 2 sessions, where she worked on major criminal justice reform, including justice reinvestment, the elimination of mandatory minimums, bail reform, and police accountability. She was later assigned to the Health and Government Operations Committee, where she focused on insurance coverage, mental health issues, and reproductive justice. Maricé has been recognized by several organizations for her leadership on women's and immigrant issues, and for her work as lead sponsor of the Maryland Trust Act, which would have protected immigrants Marylanders from hateful anti-immigrant orders. She received the Governor's Award for her work combating human trafficking and was the recipient of the Outstanding Public Service Award in recognition of her contributions to the welfare of the Latino community through public service from several local organizations. Morales was also recognized in 2019 as one of the top 100 most influential Latina leaders in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia metropolitan area. I'm sure there's much more to your resume, Maricé, but I'm just going to stop right there and tell you, bienvenida. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. Thanks everybody else for joining us. And without any further ado, Maricé, welcome again.
Thank you so much, Mauricio. Thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure of the format. Did you want me to begin with a few remarks, or did you have questions?
I have questions, but however, if you want to start with an introduction of yourself, if you want to tell us a little bit about your background, your work as an immigration lawyer, everything that you're currently doing, that'll be fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the generous words. I'm former delegate Maricé Morales. I am an attorney by trade, focusing on immigration, criminal defense, and personal injury. I'm a small business owner as a solo practitioner. I opened my practice in 2019, right before the pandemic. We have since then grown. It's me and 5 paralegals, so I feel very, very blessed. And I chose to open my practice right here in the county that I represented, the county where I live, the county that I love, and it has just been phenomenal. Although some of the things that I would like to address, if I'm honored to be elected as council member, there are definitely there's a lot of room for improvement in order to better serve our small business community. If there's folks that perhaps have a language barrier, or just simply navigating the different licensing and the permitting, as a former legislator and as an attorney, it was difficult for me to make sure that I was checking all the boxes, that I was going to this, all the state agencies, et cetera, where, that were part of the bureaucracy that exists in order to just open up a business in the county and in the state. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. I'm a daughter of self-employed individuals. In my lifetime, my parents, unfortunately, had to file for bankruptcy, and they were able to pick themselves up and continue to work in this country. Finally, we were able to become homeowners. Even though my parents had to lose that home, they were a victim of some of during the housing bubble. And so there's a lot of inequities, even in the financial literacy information and resources that exist. So when it comes to the immigrant community, folks come here to work. They come here with their dreams. They come here ready to become homeowners. And that is, why America is so prosperous. And that is why I'm so proud to be a daughter of immigrants, and why a lot of the policies that I've focused on are for that reason, to make sure that we are creating the environment and that we're getting the resources that folks need when they're in that moment in their life where they say, I'm coming to this county. I may not have the language, but you know what? I have the grit, I have the passion, I have the ability, and we should be welcoming those, because that's what's basically creating our local economy. So with that, I actually look forward to the conversation today and hearing about the issues that are important to you and your members.
Thank you. Thank you, Maricé. So based on your experience and everything you just mentioned, how can that experience and all that passion that you bring to the table, how will that help you improve education, public housing, and the economy in District 6? And to make reference, District 6, the new District 6 is basically Forest Glen, Wheaton, and Aspen Hill. It's a rather small district, but it's a new district that came out of the distribution of new districts in Montgomery County that were approved by the council in December.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So I have been fortunate enough to, at my young age, although I'm not that young, I'm 34 now, but I was elected at the age of 25. So I have already been elected and have represented a vast majority of the areas that you just described. So it includes Aspen Hill, Rockville, all the way up to Norbeck, Montcastre Mill Road, all the way to Redland. So it's actually a rather, it's smaller in terms of geographically. I mean, the population density is there. And so you also have the areas of Belpre, going down Lay Hill, down to Glenmont, of course, Wheaton, and then going into the Kent Mill, University Boulevard areas. Those were the areas that I had in my district. So some of the only, new areas I would say that I that were outside of District 19 are the areas of, I would say, going up Georgia towards Forest Glen, right? So one of the things that I'm very excited about is already understanding the diverse communities that make up District 6. And you just talked about 3 large areas, right? 3 important priorities that most constituents are worried about. And as I've been door knocking, we've been door knocking since August. So when it comes to schools, okay, during the pandemic, families have been, families, teachers, students, every stakeholder that touch, that their lives are touched by our public education system, we've been in a crisis. So, I think it's about time to, bring up our sleeves, roll up our sleeves, and just stop pointing fingers. Voters are tired of that. It's like, it wasn't, it's not me, it's you, it's not the Board of Ed, it's the council members. Like, let's stop that. Let's work together. And so the way that I work and the reputation that I have from Annapolis is, it's understanding that policy is really a sausage making business. And in this country, which is probably something that is different in our countries of origin, is, that lobbying is such a big part of the sausage making business. And, some folks are like, well, isn't that like corruption? I mean, is it? If you have the ability to create organizations like the Chamber of Commerce that can lobby on your behalf, go to Annapolis and advocate, right? That's literally what policymaking is. That's what sausage making is. So we need to bring the stakeholders together and make sure that we're working together. Stop pointing fingers. So the good news is that at the state level, we heard from Annapolis that we are in a surplus, and we're also at a point where, and I was able to work on this when I was still in Annapolis. We voted and funded what's called the blueprint. So the new blueprint, it's education reform, which essentially says that every student in the state of Maryland needs to be prepared for college or a trade by grade 10. Okay. How does that impact our community in this county? How does that impact the District 6 as you speak? We have high number of English as a second language learners, not just Hispanic, but children of, from all countries all over the globe. In addition to, high farms enrollment, free and reduced meals enrollment. So there's a lot of need. But there's also a lot of opportunity to make sure that, we're not leaving any of those children behind. So why is education so important? I mean, obviously that's the way into the middle class, but also from a local economy perspective, an economist will always say, if you are living in a place where people want to come, that's a good problem to have. We're living in a housing we have a housing shortage right now. And we are in a pivotal moment where we know in the county that people are coming to the county. So let's get ahead of it. Let's build transit-oriented communities with, density housing in job centers. Let's face it, people want to move into, excuse me, my cell phone here. People want to move into cool kind of hip areas. You look at millennials, you look at young families, folks want to be able to work, live, and play. So if you look at the popular areas of the county, you'll like places like Pike and Rose, places like Rio, and here in Glenmont, for example, and I understand the issue, has been the same issue for the last decade or longer, is dealing with the disparate owners at the Glenmont shopping center. But you know what? I'm an attorney. Anything can be negotiated. When you basically let's put a price on it. Let's make sure that those shopping centers are serving the needs of our population. And having lived, so one of the things that as a young legislator, one of the things that I was forced to do was I had to move around even within my own district because I had my student debt. I wanted to save up enough money to buy my first home by the age of 30, and to be able to do that, I had housemates. I lived in basements. I lived in apartment buildings. And so I understand because I've lived all over this district. And right now I'm actually in my apartment in Wheaton. I actually ended up having to rent out my home. And so, that's the reality of folks that are from my generation or folks that are entrepreneurs. There's a lot of self-sacrifice. Sometimes you end up not paying yourself to be able to pay your employees. I know that firsthand. I lived that through my own life experience, but also as a daughter of self-employed individuals. So you hit on a lot of different issues there, Mauricio. You mentioned education, housing, and I think was there the economy? Was it the economy, or there's just a lot? There's a lot of subjects.
Housing and economy. Education, housing, and economy. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Excellent. So exactly. So the good news is that it's all almost interconnected. If our goal is to continue to expand the tax base, to continue to attract, individuals to come to the county, that also means, okay, so again, housing affordability, which we touched, making sure that we're building transit oriented communities, and then also attracting entrepreneurs, and which is kind of what I was alluding to with my opening statement, which is, there's a lot of we have a lot of innovative, individuals right here in the county. One of the things that that I think that we should be doing better at is preserving our own students from this county. We spend $18,000 per student per year through MCPS, and a lot of times, that talent, once we've educated them, they may end up at University of Maryland, and then they end up leaving the state. So we want to make sure that we are retaining young professionals, that we're not losing them to Arlington or Arlington County or DC. And how do you do that? What is exactly what I was talking about? Creating transit-oriented, exciting communities where people want to live.
Maricé, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Let me see if have I been breaking up the whole time? No,
just the last part.
Okay. So just saying that we want to, build exciting communities where people want to live, work, and play, so that we're not losing out on our entrepreneurs, our young people, folks that we've invested in, making sure that we get the return in our investment by keeping them here in the county. Thank you for the question. Okay.
So you made an emphasis on transit-oriented communities. So I wanted to ask, do you support the I-495, I-270 expansion project, which touches tangentially on District 6 on 495?
So thank you for that question. I want to say at the outset that I think that we have an urgency to make sure that our policies are environmentally sound. At the same time, though, I am pragmatic and I sit in the same traffic as everybody else. And one of the things that I've said publicly is, we've already invested, we've made the studies, and we need to fix that infrastructure anyway. So I'm open to the different technology that exists. And if expansion, makes the most sense, I'm open to that discussion. What I don't like to see is years and years of, taxpayers' dollars, studying, because that's waste as well. So I think, I think there is an opportunity to be environmentally sound about our infrastructure, but that there's definitely a need to do something about the traffic in our areas. And if expansion is one of the tools, I'm open to that discussion. I'm not saying that's the only thing I want to do. Definitely want to continue the mass transit investment. And one of the things that I think is I want to stop this idea that people need to travel an hour away to go to work. And I think young people and entrepreneurs and innovative thinkers, they know that, they get it. So we should be creating job centers here so that we rely less on roads and rely less on expansion, but that we're investing in tools like BRT, and walkable communities. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. So how do you plan to attract businesses to Wheaton, to Forest Glen, to Aspen Hill, areas of District 6? How can we make this a more business-oriented community in your ideas?
Yeah. So the good news is that the infrastructure is here, right? We're right here in the Wheaton Urban District. My apartment is actually right by the mall. And so looking at, how our businesses have been impacted by the pandemic, survey the business owners themselves, and they'll tell you, they're for different reasons, the pricing on just the different supplies that they use has definitely had an impact on, on their services and being able to offer, or manufacture the products and services that they're offering. So first of all, we need to remedy the losses that our current business owners have been experiencing. And then also looking at how, improving their experiences with the county. How can we improve the resource? Like the resources are sometimes they're there, but they're not accessible. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, language barrier is an issue. When you go to the website, the information is not readily available. We don't have small business navigators that have the language skills that we need. So, I think the infrastructure is there. We have the Economic Development Corporation right here in Montgomery County. I think it's a great start. However, I think that we need to really be looking at who are the folks that are being left behind, the folks that are ready to take risks and they're ready to make the investment. What are the things that they're really having difficulty reaching? I would say, just capital, for startups. Folks with tax ID numbers that may not have a social security number, they don't have access to loans. They can't even build credit. So, I think I think there's an appetite in Montgomery County, not just the appetite, but the expertise to look at how we can use some of these federal funds and state funds in terms of the stimuluses that we're going to be receiving as we're transitioning out of the pandemic. So let's invest in nonprofits that can bridge that gap for so many of our neighbors. Because let's face it, a lot of folks that may be undocumented, they're able to take out a tax ID number, but what are they going to do if they don't have access to capital and they can't build credit? So those are some of the issues that are near and dear to my heart, and that I learned from the experts like you. I as a council member, as a legislator, we're not experts, we're generalists. But my commitment and my pledge to you and your membership is that, I am never the smartest person in the room. My way of working is, how can I be a resource to you? What are the things that the county needs to be doing better? And just basically, having an open door policy. Anybody who gets to know me knows I'm a very open person, and I'm always looking to learn from the experts. Thank you for the question.
So would you improve the procurement process with Montgomery County for small businesses to do business with the county? Is that
100
something that?
Yes, 100%. So one of the things that when I sat on the Health and Government Operations Committee in Annapolis, folks don't pay attention to the government operations part of that committee name, and that's where we dealt with procurement. So one of the things that we identified was that the folks that most likely got the procurement contracts were the same old people. I mean, doing it for 15, 20, 25 plus years. And so we need to democratize that process so that folks have an equal opportunity, and so that we're giving the startups and the recent entrepreneurs also access. And why do I emphasis on that? Because those are our immigrant entrepreneurs. Those are the newcomers into the market. So if we already know that Montgomery County has a high percentage of entrepreneurs that have an immigrant background, then it's in our best interest to make sure that we are making the entry into the procurement arena as accessible and as equitable as possible.
Okay. So let's shift to public housing. And you mentioned public housing before. There's a shortage of of housing basically in Montgomery County. Prices are skyrocketing, and there aren't enough units for the people that want to move here. How can we address or better on how do you plan to address the crisis on housing in District 6, where a lot of the residents here make less than $80,000 a year, and they live in rent. They rent apartments. They can't afford a house. They can't afford affordable housing. They can't afford anything other than living in a 2-bedroom apartment. What are your initiatives to address the public housing issue that we have?
Yeah, so I lived that firsthand. I had to share housing. And so we need to be strategic about the areas in the county where there is the space for high density housing. And one of the things that I've noticed throughout the pandemic, we have industrial parks and commercial buildings that are empty because folks are working from home. And so one of the things that I want to propose is to survey the county and see, okay, there's already this industrial park, there's already this building. Let's, make improvements, et cetera. Let's purchase it. Let's make improvements, and let's, or open up to bidders, et cetera. But let's develop it and make it into residential housing. I mean, that's just one creative idea. But beyond that, I was talking about these job centers. So, areas in District 6, the areas of, well, obviously, Veers Mill, Connecticut, Glenmont, Wheaton, downtown Wheaton, going towards University Boulevard, there we have high density. In some of those areas, we have high density. We have some apartment buildings in right where I live, but that you still have areas where you could definitely build up. And I think we need to reconcile the narrative, because we have also folks that have been that came here 30, 40 years ago looking for a suburban area, and that aren't very enthusiastic about development. They're not enthusiastic about the sprawl. So, but as I mentioned earlier, we know that folks want to live here. We know that people are coming, and the folks that are here now are increasingly not able to afford their home. So we're facing a crisis now, and it's imperative that we're strategic about the spaces that we do have, and then in the areas that we can afford to develop, let's make sure that we're developing in a smart way that doesn't obviously it doesn't bring down the quality of the housing, because just because something, because an individual can't afford something doesn't mean that they don't deserve quality. So it's also about the quality, right? And then also the affordability. So I think there is an opportunity to do that. I definitely am not a proponent of big development that doesn't take into consideration how that development would change the demographics of the neighborhood. I was born and raised in Arlington County. Most of the families of the street that I grew up on are no longer there. I mean, so gentrification is real, and folks were pushed, like south, south of 90 on 95. We don't want that in Montgomery County. And I think we have the appetite, and as you mentioned, and I'm very impressed that the Chamber of Commerce is asking this question, because it shows the appetite. A lot of folks have that idea. Well, if you're only profit oriented, then why should we care about who's living in our apartment buildings? So I'm very impressed that you asked that question, and it's a high priority of mine. So like I said, between surveying the spaces that are naturally becoming vacant, and landlords aren't able to actually fill, I'm talking about commercial buildings, and then also surveying areas that that where there is the space and the radius to safely develop, and to continue to create mixed use development. So residential up top, commercial in the bottom. And I think we absolutely have there's the appetite in District 6, and I'm excited to be a part of that process.
You actually anticipated my next question, which was going to be about gentrification. How can all that development in housing, because usually when you have housing development, it tends to displace population, particularly the population most vulnerable that lives in the community. What are your thoughts about preventing gentrification in District 6 if you bring all that development where you have the attraction of the commercial at the bottom and then residential at the top? And usually that kind of residential tends to be a little bit of upscale. And then all of a sudden we can't afford to live in those apartments anymore.
So it's a mixed bag of tools that we can use. But let me just say that's the $1 million question, right? That's the $1 million question. So one of the ideas that come to mind is you can absolutely develop and have county regulation saying, a percentage of that building will need to be for low income individuals. That's not going to fix it all, because then, obviously the majority of those units will be at market price. But I think between, having the appetite to protect our communities, I think just welcoming those conversations where vocabulary words like rent stabilization are not necessarily seen as anti-market ideas and concepts. But I think there's a conversation to be had about rising prices in everything that we're consuming and the stagnation of wages. So I think it is criminal to believe and to continue to promote the standard of life that people are living right now, where more than half your paycheck is going to the roof over your head. I mean, that's not sustainable. We're creating a society, full of debt and anxiety, people just living beyond their means. So I think it's not just the supply and demand equation, but it's also, making bold moves around wages and making sure that the entrepreneurs, right, and the innovative thinkers that we're attracting, that we're creating an environment where employers are offering, sustainable wages, that folks can actually, live off of those wages. So it's a whole ecosystem. I wouldn't just say that it's a supply and demand issue. It's an ecosystem where employers, we have conscientious employers that, want to create good jobs with salaries and benefits that allows folks to remain in the county as we're improving some of these, low investment areas. Because let's face it, I mean, people want to live in nice places. People like that. It's a fallacy to say, I can create a really lovely place and make it free for everybody or make it cheap for everybody. No, that's not a reality. So the market is going to work. The market's going to work, and then government can come in to kind of assuage some of those fast pace growth or increase in housing pricing. So I think it's a delicate balance. I am not naive. I will not tell you I'm going to guarantee that everybody's going to live in nice places and it's going to be cheap. No, that's not possible. But what I will say is that I want to attract, good employers that are going to create good jobs that will allow our county residents to remain and not be gentrified, right? And so that we work with developers, and the developers are not getting a tax write-off, and that we're just basically just giving our whole piggy bank to our developers. The other thing is that there's an opportunity for tax reform, county tax reform. Folks, for example, residential property owners are sometimes paying more taxes than commercial property owners. So there is also an opportunity to look at that. And again, my perspective is, let's think creatively. Let's put our thinking caps. Let's bring the different stakeholders and let's work together so that we are, investing in a county that is innovative. It's cool. People want to live here. And I keep saying cool because economists actually surveyed, young professionals and millennials. And they basically said, like, where do you want to live? I want to live in cool cities. So Montgomery County, we're competing with DC and Arlington. And so we need to remain a cool county. And I think there's a smart way to do it where we're not eroding the character and the beautiful diversity of our county. And I want to be a part of that solution.
How can we turn District 6 into a destination? It's currently not. Nothing is attracting people to District 6, particularly Wheaton. It's a pass-by community. You go to Silver Spring, you go to Bethesda, you go to Chevy Chase, you go to North Bethesda, you go to many places, but you don't go to Wheaton. How can we turn District 6 into a destination so that it looks a lot cooler for people to live and stay here?
Well, I would disagree. I was attracted to Wheaton. I am in Wheaton. I have the Wheaton Mall right behind me. I think I've touched some on this already, but there is an opportunity, especially in the Wheaton Triangle, to make sure that the businesses that are there have the tools to continue to grow. I think there's some dissatisfaction with the local business owners, especially as a consequence of the planning board building that was built there. A lot of businesses saw it as just detrimental to their own growth because the parking was closed for so long, et cetera. But I think that it's a short-term sacrifice for long-term gains. I think that if you want to revitalize a community, sometimes the county does need to lead by example. And I think that Councilmember Navarro, obviously the incumbent and whose endorsement I have, that was her intention, was to bring a mixed bag of strategies so that Wheaton would become an attraction. And so then by building the planning board, and then I also by investing in the Wheaton Regional Library, I think that it is changing. I think Wheaton is changing, and I think we were seeing that in the development of more buildings and the modernization of a lot of these areas. But there's a lot of, and also the Friar Plaza. That's also a beautiful plaza. So I think that is what I want to build upon. I want to make this area, Wheaton, Glenmont, Veers Mill, a place where people want to, shop, play, feel safe, because public safety has also become an issue, and so there's definitely the appetite. And like I said, I mean, we should be advocating, especially seeing that there's going to be some funding coming from the state with the surplus that we keep hearing is probably going to be around for at least another 5 years. Some of the state roads that for the longest time, weren't being paid attention to. We need to be on top of that. We need to be advocating for that. So it's a combination of things, and like I mentioned before, it's an ecosystem of things. So if people feel safe, if people feel like they can, safely cross the road, if it's well lit, if it's a modern community, I think that gives into the coolness of an area, and then to continue to attract. Sometimes, I'm even open to a conversation about a nightlife task force. So I'm married to a Frenchman, and so I listen to a lot of just kind of like worldwide, I guess, news stations, and there's this idea of having a night mayor, having mayors that actually think about how can we continue to create revenue for our residents throughout the night. So, I'm not saying that that we need to be open 24 hours, but if there's an appetite for it, why not look into some nightlife here? Also, just surveying the folks that are there now. What kinds of issues are they coming across, and how can the county resolve those issues so we can continue to attract entrepreneurs and innovative thinkers, so that Wheaton and Glenmont and the Veers Mill area can be cool attractions.
Interesting. You mentioned you have the endorsement of current council member Nancy Navarro. Mm-hmm. What of her initiatives would you keep if you're elected as a council member, and what would you change?
Yeah, so Council Member Navarro, one of her big issues was economic development. So they created the 4 pillars of success by investing. That's what I'm talking about, an ecosystem. And so building on the 4 pillars, which are transportation, housing, economic development, and continued the education. So definitely want to build up on that. I also want to build on her initiatives around early education. And I really want to stress on the language acquisition piece. Our children, you can't help it. At home, you're most likely going to be speaking Spanish until you're enrolled in school. That was my experience. And a child's ability to quickly learn concepts that perhaps they haven't even been exposed to in their own language, that really shapes, the way that they're going to learn early on. And that's why early childhood education is so important. And again, we're at a crossroads right now. Not a crossroads, I'm sorry. We're at a pivotal moment where the blueprint, which means we're going to get a lot of state funding to especially for in early education, because it's been shown through data that when you equal the playing field during the early education years, children that may have fallen behind, like folks from all backgrounds, but particularly Black and Brown youth, the quicker you can get them to be at an equal playing field, the most likely they're going to be able to succeed academically. So I'm definitely a proponent of that. And I think there's an opportunity to, again, just elect a young woman who has already represented parts of District 6, that understands the diverse communities, from the Orthodox Jewish community in Kent Mill to the Latino entrepreneurs in Wheaton, to just the folks that have been here for 30 to 40 years ago, in Aspen Hill and Rockville. So I'm very excited at the opportunity to continue my public service. I have been privileged enough to worked in the 3 branches of government, judicial, legislative, and in the executive branch. And my heart beats faster, and I feel purpose when I'm in the legislative branch. And that's what I want to do. I want to be the council member for District 6, so we can legislate, use the budget dollars that we have to address the needs of our constituents. And at the end of the day, that's what I would want in an elected official, is a public servant that really is going to go to bat for the needs of her constituents. And the only way that you can do that is by really truly having a connection to your constituents. And that's what my campaign has been about. going back to the folks that I had already represented, going to the civic association meetings, talking to different families, talking to homeowners, talking to renters, and making sure that the needs of District 6 are going to be high priority when it comes to the different capital projects that we're gonna be advocating for, and I'm just ready to get working.
Good. Education is definitely a key component on attracting young professionals and new families to the area. And we know that the gap between Black and brown children and white children continues to expand. What can you do as a council member to address education in District 6 and actually improve the outcomes of education, particularly elementary, middle, and high school?
Yeah, so this has been the theme of what I've been responding to, right? And that's because education is so key, and it's part of the overall economic ecosystem that we want to create in the county. So let me add on points that I have not already mentioned. So as a product of the public school system, I was an English as a second language learner. I am who I am today because of the public school system. Grew up in an immigrant household. Parents went through bankruptcy, lost their home. And today I'm an attorney, and I was elected at the age of 25. And that is, to me, that is the American dream. And I feel privileged, and I want to continue that for all of our kids, or kids of color, or kids that have been falling behind, because perhaps, they're coming to school without breakfast, or, for whatever reason, mom, dad aren't doing well at home. So be it mental health issues or poverty. These are real issues. So I want to address the issue around mental health. I think that the pandemic has brought to light what we already knew to be true. And that is, just folks of color always end up being disproportionately affected by whatever crisis is happening. And so, for a healthy transition for a student back into school so they can perform well, mental health is going to be a huge part of that. And so, as I mentioned, the blueprint, which is our, Maryland's reform in our education, there is also a calling for increased counselors in our schools. So we're looking at, depending on the area and the county, we're looking at one psychologist per 500 to 1,000 students, depending on the school. And that psychologist is not a counselor. That psychologist is there purely for testing. So again, where it's a disservice to our students, and we are putting an incredible amount of pressure and a burden on our teachers to, in addition to being educators, they are also expected to deal with or not know how to deal with some of the mental health issues that are going on at home, especially because kids have not been learning in the same environment. Their social skills are lacking, anxiety levels, etc., all of the things. In addition to that, something that folks don't realize is that Montgomery County is second to the city of Houston when it comes to receiving the highest number of unaccompanied minors. So as an immigration attorney, and I sit also on the Board of Trustees of Montgomery College, and it's connected, and I'll tell you why. We have a responsibility to welcome these children and understand that they're enrolling in our schools, they're being reunified with families that they haven't seen for 10, 13 years. So there is trauma. So our society, our families are living with trauma. Parents don't understand what their children need. Then these kids are going to school, and then they, because their emotional needs aren't being met at home. Then they fall victim to just being recruited by just the wrong people. And so one of the things that I always bring up as a trustee in Montgomery College is that, we're seeing that a lot of our kids, they're not adapting quickly enough during MCPS, be it because of the mental health issues, be it because of language barrier. There aren't enough years in their academic experience to learn English and to be prepared for college. So community college is an absolute excellent option, especially Montgomery College is just an excellent institution anyway. But there is an opportunity. And again, we work as an ecosystem. We don't work as in siloed areas. So people are paying their tax dollars. Those tax dollars are paying for an institution like Montgomery College. But at the same time, we're also paying for schools that are failing a lot of our Black and brown kids. So we need to look at, okay, how can we better use our own tax dollars and get return for our investment? Let's really look at what our kids need right now. Our educators are overwhelmed. We're expecting them to do too many things in the classroom. So let's get them the resources that they need. We need more language acquisition specialists. When you talk to educators that are teaching ESOL, they don't have necessarily the training to teach ESOL. And these are educators themselves that will tell you that. So they feel already overwhelmed with that. And they don't have extra staff for reading, reading specialists, or if there's a speech impediment, we don't have enough speech impediment specialists. And then also the issue with the counselors. So this is something that's very important to me. And as a council member, while I'm not a Board of Ed member, but I can use my influence, right? Because at the end of the day, we do have to vote on a budget, and we want to make sure that we're speaking with the superintendent, that we're speaking with the Board of Ed, and that the budget that we're funding reflects the needs of our constituents. Thank you for that question.
All right. Maricé, what makes you the best candidate for District 6?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. I will say, I have been honored to already have represented parts of District 6. I have the experience, and not only the
Maricé, I think you broke up. We couldn't hear the first part of your answer.
Okay. Is it better? Is it okay now?
It is better now. Yes.
Okay. I was just saying that I have been privileged enough to have already represented parts of District 6. So I have the experience as a former state legislator. I have those relationships, because at the end of the day, it's the relationships that we have that will allow us to quickly navigate the different county entities that will allow us to implement these policies. So I'm the only candidate that would be ready from day one to get the job done. And it's easy to say that, but you can look at my endorsements. Most of the delegation has already endorsed me. I have the support of Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Gabe Albornoz, Board of Ed member Carla Silvestre. And I feel very honored to have their support. And it really speaks to, my ability to really already know, the field and know who I can turn to make change happen. Also, if you also look at my campaign, I'm building a coalition. While I'm very proud to be Latina, I have also been pigeonholed, and I only know this because of my own experience. I've been pigeonholed. When the media writes about me, they say that I'm, that I only care about Latinos. I love my Latinos, but I also represent a diverse district. So if you look at my coalition, I have the endorsement and the support of Black leaders, Jewish leaders, folks, recent arrivals, immigrant folks, women, folks that are seniors. I'm just very, very honored to have built such a coalition of, I would say, more than 55 volunteers. We've been door knocking, like I said, since August. We are about over 7,500 doors. I have raised $91,000, and they're cash on hand. So I am very conservative when it comes to, running with other people's money. And I'm going to make the best of it to ensure a victory on June 28th. So I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. I hope that my words and my passion have come through. I know it's different virtually, but I can tell you that I have made huge personal sacrifices to the point where, my husband and I have decided, to not start a family yet until I'm elected to become a council member, because there's a lot of personal sacrifice that goes into this. And I also sacrifice time for my business. And that's really because my heart is in public service. So I hope that you can join my team, join my campaign. Please reach out to me. I'm super accessible. You can visit me at maricemorales.com. Also, obviously on social media. And yeah, so thank you so very much. And I'm excited to the victory on June 28th.
And it's been a great conversation, Maricé. Thank you so much for everything you gave us today. And of course, we wish you the best on June 28th. And we have Miriam Cornejo with us, Carmen Rojas, Alexi Sanchez de Boado, Alexandra Peña. At this point, I would like to open the floor for questions. So if anybody that's joining us today has any questions for Maricé, please either raise your hand on Zoom or unmute yourself and feel free to ask the questions. Yes, Carmen Rojas.
Yeah, yes. Hi, Maricé. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was excellent. Congratulations. And you are very welcome. You talk about the mental health in students. The schools they have many problems because they don't have enough counselors. What exactly do you plan to do to have more people to help on that issue? Because for this situation, the wrong people are recruiting more and more kids. They have many kids now, and it's really dangerous, and the police is not enough. So I know it's a big problem, but do you think something about that problem now?
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's heartbreaking to see our youth, like I was saying, especially those that fall victim to being recruited by gangs and just just bad influencers in their lives. So this is something that I have seen firsthand, because a lot of times it'll be my immigration client, and then next thing I know, their child is locked up. And I'm like, so what's happening? So when it comes to the counselors, there's already a mandate by this new reform that I mentioned, which is the blueprint, and where there's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars set aside just for the implementation of more counselors in our schools. So obviously those funds will come to the county, and then the county will pass it on, and the Board of Ed will have to vote on that budget. But we want to make sure that we're creating the environment where we're talking to each other, and that we're, as Board of Ed members or as council members, or talking to the superintendent, because this is the process. The superintendent will come with a budget and will say, these are, this is what I believe the schools need. And so that's one person. If that superintendent is not working with the stakeholders, it's not working with MCEA, the teachers union, or they're not working with SEIU, Local 500, which is the bus drivers and the para educators and the counselors and the social workers, for example, then that budget may not reflect the priorities in our schools. So that's why it's very important, right? Because who is the superintendent? How do they get there? They are appointed by the county executive. And so as a county executive, he or she needs to say, okay, I need to appoint somebody who understands the needs of our kids in Montgomery County, not a transplant from Chicago or New York. No, somebody that understands exactly the psychology of the children that you're talking about. And I'm the only person that talks about this.
Yeah,
there's no other candidate that brings us up. And this is something that I've noticed as an immigration attorney, but also in Montgomery College. Seeing, some of the kids that we're losing, just not being enrolled, not re-enrolling, because enrollment is down in the college as well. But this issue of mental health and the trauma. So obviously injecting. Oh, is it getting cut off again?
No.
Oh, sorry. So injecting more counselors into the schools, but also there are two other major mental health nonprofits in the county, Every Mind and Cornerstone. Unfortunately, Cornerstone does not service undocumented children.
I know. Yeah.
So that's an issue. An issue. And then also, but then Every Mind does. So, finding ways to do that. And then also just awareness that unaccompanied children, they can become special immigrants that then allow them to become green card holders. And that I know as an immigration attorney. So as long as a child is younger than 21 years of age, is not married, and has been reunited with either a family member or a friend in the state of Maryland, then they can be eligible for what's called special immigrant juvenile status. And in a year, that child will have social security number and will be able to have a green card. So those kinds of ideas. So again, you're looking at a candidate that has legislated and that is also an attorney and that understands the psychology of this county.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You have
Thank
the
you so much.
experience, definitely. Yes. No, and it would be great if if you invite non-profit organizations to do that work very fast. We need to do it right now because it's very important and urgent. There are many kids in danger now.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that important question.
Well, if there are
don't feel pressured, or if people want to reach out to me as well. Did somebody ask a question? No.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So there's also a debate tonight that I have to get to DC anyway. So aren't you guys co-sponsors? I think you're co-sponsors of that debate.
We are. Yes.
Yeah. So I have to drive to DC.
We have to drive to DC as well. So, but Maricé, again, it was a pleasure having you with us today, and thank you so much for the candid and open responses you gave us and all the insights that you shared with us today. To those who join us online, thank you so much for being with us. We will post this interview on our social media channels. Feel free to revisit the interview. If anybody has any questions directly to Maricé. Maricé, you gave us your website and maricemorales.com. They can reach out to you directly. And please stay tuned for any other events. We're having events on a weekly basis, and we continue to invite other candidates for other elected positions in Montgomery County. Primary elections are on June 28th. And Maricé, we wish you the best. And once again,
thank you.
Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Un abrazo para todos. Gracias por tu liderazgo, Mauricio. Y nada, gracias por también representar a los pequeños y medianos empresarios en el condado, que it's very, very important work. Te lo agradezco de todo corazón.
Palabras.
Un abrazo, gracias.